Welcome ladies and gentlemen to the CIMA strategic case study pre-seen summary with the complete commentary. This is segment 1 of this particular series of videos in which I will be looking at the entire pre-seen content that the examiner has provided to us with the additional thoughts and the additional commentary that is required for us to kind of familiarize ourselves and be solid in terms of context. Right? We have to have those additional thoughts in our mind that will effectively help us understand the situation. Let's have a look. Knowledge City Technology Park is the company that we have been assigned, and the first section and also the most critical section, and without this understanding we absolutely cannot move on to writing a good answer. You or we or you in particular, in this case, your role has to be understood, and that is why even in the blueprint CIMA dedicates more than a couple of pages to really specifically stress so much, which I have touched on a lot in my YouTube videos. The examiner stresses on how important it is for you to understand your role. So you have been appointed as Senior Manager Finance for KCTP. So please understand your role seriously through the blueprint and the expectations. I go into extensive detail about what this role entails and what this role is, rather what CIMA expects from this particular appointment in my initial session, in the introductory session where I introduced you to the strategic case study. So that session takes care of all the necessary hints and all the necessary thoughts to understand the role seriously. You report to the board, which means you have to simulate a board level or strategic level thinking. Big picture, you are the lead, so leadership role, and have to be a good agent for the shareholders. Now, one of the things that I want to really say is that when it comes to board level and strategic level thinking, and with the association of the ethics and governance and CSR and sustainability and those areas to this particular spectrum of managing the company well, it is clearly important that we approach the management of the company in a way that we do the right thing. This is not about doing things right. I mean, it ultimately boils down to doing things right, but the things that we do must be the right things, and that is strategic level thinking. It is about doing the right thing. That connectivity to ethics, that connectivity to governance is something I wanted to establish at the outset. You are an advisor on special projects and strategic matters, so obviously the tasks will be including or will include special projects and any strategic matter. Any board member can write to you. Moving on, the second section of the pre-seen summary is the extract of what Adviland is. So Adviland is the country that KCTP is based in. It is a developed country indicating positive economic infrastructure and factor conditions. It has a well-regulated stock exchange, which I refer to as ASX in this case, which means that there's a mature capital market that KCTP is associating itself with. The currency is $. ASX requires companies to prepare financial statements in accordance with IFRSs, which means that KCTP is subject to accepted financial reporting controls. And Adviland has 27 technology parks spread across the country, which means innovation and possibly could be, once you complete your research, you know what this means really well, but I will be explaining it and touching on it briefly in the live session as well. We could possibly be a regional investment cluster, or we could be positioned right in the middle of one. If Adviland is a relatively smaller space in terms of the geographical size, and if there are 27 technology parks, that's a massive number. Technology parks in Adviland. So the 27 parks they mention here vary in size. So variety indicates that science and technology parks, STPs, can range across different geographical dynamics and therefore address different expectations. Some of these parks are little more than large converted office blocks that offer small to medium sized spaces for software development, small lab and workshop requirements. So while some of the parks are so and so, you can connect this to a couple of our buildings, right? Two of our buildings seem to have or seem to cater to this kind of tenants. Others built on large campus spaces with several major units and the necessary infrastructure to support large scale activities. So this shows that STPs can be a home to all kinds of innovation focused businesses, and that is ideally the summary of that, or the gist of that, is that Adviland really is a good country from the limited information, from the limited, exclusively limited information. One of the key pieces of information that tells me that Adviland is good is because there are 27 parks. A country that does not favor STPs will not be able to establish 27 parks. That's a massive number. There are only about nearly 500 parks in the world, out of which if nearly 30 are in Adviland. Adviland is a highly innovative focused country. You can even link Porter's Diamond and some of the factors, some of the elements in the Porter's Diamond and how they favor STPs as well. Moving on to the third section, technology parks or science parks, STPs. So the definition is that areas established for occupation by companies that wish to conduct scientific and or technological research and development. To conduct scientific and or technological research and development. So these are areas purely dedicated to this particular element or requirement. So only those companies that are interested in scientific and or technological research and development will pay money and take up space in a science and technology park, or who will benefit largely from the collaborations and the networks that a STP offers. Geographical elements. So the moment I see this, I realize that geography is a critical success factor in general for technology parks. We are still not talking about, in this segment, we are still not talking about KCTP in specificity. We are talking about technology parks or science parks in general. So comprised of buildings that are used as science or engineering laboratories or offices used for design work or software development. So we see that there is specialty infrastructure, occupies large plots of land, space is important, space between buildings to offer tenants privacy. So privacy and comfort is expected and offered through these technology parks, with the scope to extend buildings if required. So there is large amounts of flexibility offered as well. And STPs are located on sites that are intended to attract significant numbers of organizations. So scalability is also provided as a critical element in terms of associated to geography, because you wouldn't really want a STP established in a cramped up space right in the middle of a highly urbanized population. That is not a space that you really want to go and establish a STP in. There are a couple of research documents, especially the research documents I would have provided by now, I hope, related to the critical success factors of a STP. You will notice how important or how these elements are repeated by specialists. The second subheading under technology parks, or the third one, is location considerations. So location is also critical, not only the geography but also the location itself. It is looking at the information, it is a critical success factor of the business, and under location we can consider three elements: cost, accessibility and university connection. In terms of cost, located on the outskirts of major cities where land prices are low. So if you're looking at, or if you're considering a suitable location for STP, you would want to invest in a place where it supports with all these expectations while also prices are cheap. So investment requirement is definitely there, and the impact of the national real estate market and economics related to it, right? So the macroeconomic conditions have a role to play here, pestle, etc., etc. Accessibility. Sites are generally located sufficiently close to airports, mainline railway stations and motorways for easy access. So staff, clients, partners and collaborators can easily come and go and commute to and from the STP, which means that it is critical to engage multiple stakeholders conveniently. There is a research document or actually a promo material from the Amsterdam Science Park. Please do take a look at it. It will show you how important convenience for stakeholders is. So it is pitched as one of the most important elements when marketing a STP globally. And third, and very important, extremely important element under location is the connection to a university. Normally, STPs are expected to be within the proximity to at least one major university. More the better. Most tech parks are initially established by universities themselves. So STPs cannot really succeed without this relationship. So clearly, a CSF. And this leads to the need to the management of this relationship most effectively. So given that we looked at all the three key location considerations, the next is the buildings themselves, the spaces that the tenants will come and station themselves or occupy. When it comes to the buildings, we have to understand that the design specifications must be utilizable and convenient. So careful planning is critical prior to development and expansion of STPs. So under the building, you have to consider the occupancy, which is generally intended for sole occupancy by individual tenants. Size, generally it should be large spaces. Needs, the building should be designed to be equipped and adapted to meet a variety of different needs. So what kind of special requirements? Are the STPs focused on a specific industry or general? Will decide the design and architectural specifications of the building. So if it's a specialized technology park like biotech or something related to chemistry, then almost all the buildings will have a particular way of how it is designed, right? But if it's a general science and technology park where we expect anybody to be able to come and enter and occupy spaces, then the design specifications of the buildings, the drawing, the architecture, accessibility, security elements, ventilation, all these factors will be different. Strength. It must be strong enough, the buildings, withstand impact of natural disasters and offer confidence for tenants to be able to now, say for example, if you look at some of the states in the United States, right, in the United States of America, there are states like Arizona or Philly that get hit by tornadoes and severe natural disasters. Now, you wouldn't really want to. That's why we see a lot of the US, the research triangle, all of this in spaces like North Carolina and really and close to New York, right, close to the eastern seaboard of the United States when you look at it geographically, because they don't want to be in vulnerable locations. That's one thing that I noticed, right? You don't really go and establish STPs in places where either it can't withstand or where there are frequent natural disasters and conditions. Even Japan, when they set up the Kitakyushu Science and Technology Park, they were very vigilant about where exactly they want to establish or anchor the park. So it must be strong enough and able to withstand the impact of disasters and offer confidence for tenants that they are in a reliable location when it comes to the work they want to do. So overall, high levels of flexibility and adaptability is incorporated to attract, depending on the specialization, a higher number of and a wider variety of STPs can exist. Right? So STPs have a wide scope. From the building specifications themselves, STPs can vary from each other. The next subheading is business aspiration. So STPs should be a hub for new ideas, so innovate. They should allow for companies and for innovators to exploit synergies, so commercialize. Right? You wouldn't want synergies happening if there is no commercial element to it. So innovate, commercialize, and offer potential for collaboration. So collaborate. So I have basically extracted or transformed this sentence into three keywords. The business aspiration related to STPs are primarily to innovate, commercialize, and collaborate. The fundamental need behind setting up STP, for example, the Silicon Valley or the Palo Alto story, though it was unintended. Right? So nobody specifically planned hard for this. But what happened was that Silicon Valley offered all three: innovate, commercialization, and collaborations. And that is how today it is the biggest innovation hub in the world. Let's now focus on the business model itself. So the park offers buildings or offices for rent, which makes rent one of the primary sources of income for STPs. So it's ideally then the property and space renting business, and offers flexibility to tenants to move to larger premises if more space is required. So within the business model of renting out space, the expectation is that STPs should have the ability to offer tenants the opportunity to expand to larger premises if and when more space is needed. In addition to this, one of the most important aspects when it comes to a tenant considering coming and stationing themselves in a science and technology park is the facilities and the amenities provided. So ideally, must invest technology parks or STPs are expected to or must invest heavily in infrastructure for major tenants. So there is definitely that major capital expenditure and investment requirements that have to be in your mind when it comes to thinking about the investment and the financing and the dividend decision. So the investment decision, the capex decision, is critical to STPs to successfully operate. So what sort of facilities can or does a STP offer? Starting with stable, safe and consistent electrical power that is critical for stable operational continuity and safety. So within this fitting and maintaining equipment that prevents changes to the voltage and the available current. So you don't really want brownouts or blackouts or these different keywords that people use whenever voltage and the stability of the electrical current and the grid is compromised. You don't want that happening. Distributing it safely across the campus, so requires more than just installing electrical cables, right? So if there's heavy equipment that are being used, sensitive equipment that absorbs and utilizes large amounts of current, there can always be situations, a short circuit, anything that compromises the stability of the grid can cause a major chain reaction, and we don't really want that. And that is on top of the risk of what kind of research is going on in whatever that building it may be, because if the research is I get reminded of the recent the Lebanese incident, right? So if there is hazardous items there, if there are chemicals that can be quite damaging if a spark is caught upon. So we have to be extremely careful when we maintain the electrical power. Second is high-speed data links. So information transmission and processing real time now is a critical aspect. That brings me to 5G infrastructure, which is heavily popular and which Internet of Things that particular technology is built on, right? Without 5G, you cannot have successful IoT. So high-speed data links seem to be critical. In what way or form doesn't matter, we need data. And you will notice in some of the literature that if you really do your research, when they prepare their brochures, when they prepare their marketing material and presentations, this aspect is always touched on by STPs. Then site security, like security patrols, closed circuit television monitoring of the campus, security office to monitor building alarms and call emergency services. All of these fall under the purview of the critical element of site security. So many areas have to be touched on: hardware, intellectual property, software, information, humanware, R&D project safety, and all aspects relate to security. So it is a key risk factor, and compromising security can lead to reputational risk, and we don't really want trouble there. We don't want any issues with our brand image and reputation. We are the largest, we've been in the market for the longest time period in Adviland. We want to safeguard our reputation and image always in the best possible manner, which means security is all the more important. Centralized telephone and answering services. So call operators on behalf of tenants take calls, take messages, transfer calls, provide basic information, etc. So there are additional support services, and this can lead to additional income as well. There should be sufficient car parking, accessibility, convenience factor, facilities to secure bicycles, again accessibility, convenience, and there is that eco-friendly opportunity with bicycles. There are a lot of STPs around the world that promote the use of bicycles in and out of the campus or even within the campus itself. Frequent bus services from the park to local public transport hubs and airports. Again, accessibility, convenience for all relevant stakeholders. So ideally, maintenance, repairs, servicing, ongoing support with a heavy major tenant need analysis. Right? So continuous tenant need analysis is critical to a STP success. The whole point is that to be ahead in the game, we have to understand and stay ahead of tenant requirements. Right? We should be well equipped. We should be thinking ahead, and we should be well equipped to and well ready. Right, prepared for when a tenant comes at us and tells us they want something, because being in a position to give them what they want is what makes a tenant happy, and therefore ultimately in terms of finances us happy as well. So specifically, if you look at, there are a couple of points in the pre-seen that focuses on the small tenant side of things. So small and medium sized spaces are what are offered for smaller tenants that can be adapted and configured. Those spaces can be adapted and configured. You can use multiple ways, right? You can use from even simple partitioning. It can be adapted and configured to meet the needs of tenants who don't need sole occupancy of buildings. So this allows smaller players. Another critical aspect, due to the potential to become larger or anchor tenants later. So there is always this idea that you let a small guy in and the small guy is high potential and the guy keeps growing, then it is very likely that there could be a long-term partnership, a long-term anchoring. In this case, with respect to renting out space, there is always that opportunity. And usually these spaces are created by subdividing one or more of their buildings into separate units, which is seemingly the most practical approach. Rather than going for a new building, what you do is you work with what you have but subdivide it in effective ways. And on that note, let's move to the next important section, the general information that has been provided in the pre-seen about the tenants. Now under tenants, the first subheading we see is the types of clients, and the pre-seen provides us two separate segments within the types of clients. The first one is startup companies whose founders are entrepreneurs. So which means that they will have different requirements and expectations with a higher risk attached, but also a higher return dependent on the time frame. Because if these entrepreneurs who are joining or who want to step into a science and technology park and operate there, and if they have a large go-to-market, or if they have a faster go-to-market rate, and if they can push the product sooner to the market, and if the product has high potential, they can very easily be converted to an anchor tenant very fast. And that is a high risk, high return element that is associated with this type of clients. Usually these types of clients are keen to develop an idea into a commercially viable product, generally funded by venture capitals. So there is always that opportunity to connect. And this is why we see a trend of a lot of science and technology parks letting not only venture capitalists but angel investors to come and set up their offices, so that collaborative opportunities can be created between these kinds of tenants with, to set up with them with funding. Usually have enough resources to sustain themselves throughout the design process, which relatively reduces risk, and small spaces, not sole occupancy of buildings in a convenient location with good physical security is expected by these tenants, these types of tenants specifically, which means there's a lower range of investment and needs to fulfill as opposed to the larger ones. So there are always these kinds of companies, subsidiaries of major corporations. They wish to draw upon the expertise from local universities, usually initiated through higher institutes of education, which are in close proximity as well, which we looked at in the geographical or the location side of things. In addition, these subsidiaries or these clients, these types of companies hope to give the design team freedom to work without distractions. So innovation, research and creativity mindset usually needs focus with a disciplined structure, and STPs are the best solution to offer the design team this kind of freedom, through which they will have the incentive to ask for better results and higher return on investments as well, right? Because if a company, if a subsidiary of a major corporation is investing that much and letting its team operate out of STP, it means the expectations are high. And we see this a lot with pharmaceutical companies which have separate teams working across the globe, sometimes even away from the space that away from the state that they are heavily positioned in, they are based in, for the design team to really operate in high levels of secrecy and privacy and comfort to boost their creativity and do the work they are supposed to do really well. Which means that there are a wide range of tenants with different areas of interest. General examples of innovation spaces, some are given, not all, but some are given in the pre-seen. The ones that we see in the pre-seen are engineering, ICT, information and communication technology, biotechnology, electronics, computer science and hardware, and consulting itself. So we understand what consulting is as we move forward. Then I want to look at expectations from the tenant's perspective. So what do tenants expect? And the pre-seen gives us a few passages on this. They say that tenants usually are looking for a base from which to conduct research and development. Or I would also add the BD word, research and business development as well, because commercialization of research is critical for corporate tenants. And that is usually hinted in one of the news stories as well. Then flexibility. Pre-seen says to be able to move to larger premises if needs require more space, and they should be adaptable. They are looking for adaptable, and they should be equipped to meet a variety of different needs, right? So the space has to cater in terms of high levels of flexibility to the tenants. And tenants are looking to enjoy the ability to interact and engage with collaborators and clients. So collaboration is key for a science and technology park success. Entire chain is associated from ideation to commercialization. So there are always people who come purely for that collaboration opportunity, and successful STPs do that, execute that aspect and offer that opportunity in the best possible level. Then expect staff, collaborators and clients to have easy access. So accessibility is critical. Even the tenants expect this. Not only that STPs look to offer this, which we looked at in the previous section, but tenants definitely expect this side of things. Close proximity to universities and therefore being able to consult with leading academic researchers in various fields. So knowledge, expertise primarily from higher institutes of education. Having access to a workforce in the form of local graduates from nearby universities, which means that employment opportunities with a symbiotic relationship, a give and take, so to speak, but also which adds value to the innovative mindset, because when you have new graduates, when you have capable new graduates, it means they can think differently, they can add great value to the creative element of the research and development work that is being done. That is very important with this kind of innovative areas that companies would want to pursue. Some large corporations are looking to set up individual teams away from their main corporate R&D center. So isolated research commitments for confidentiality, focus, convenience, comfort, speed and specialization. All of these reasons make it important that some tenants are looking to set up teams away from their main R&D center. Next, let's look at how tenants expect, or what kind of the story behind the collaborations with other tenants. So these collaborations can take many forms. It could be through a direct provision of paid service, so value additions from that aspect, or natural synergies which are normally expected as well. Like if there's a conference, you go, you meet each other and something comes up. Natural synergies. Benefits from being associated with a location that is attractive to potentially interested parties like corporate designers, job applicants and other professional contacts, and many more such as consultants, marketers, mentors, incubators, VCs, angel investors, etc. So networking is key to success and is essential for a STP to effectively facilitate for reputational branding, marketing, and credibility aspects. We continuously see, even in practical actual industry research, we continuously see how networking has become such an important foundational element. It is a critical success factor. The ability to allow people to collaborate, allow tenants to collaborate with the universities, with other tenants, with VCs, with angel investors. All of these, the networking is highly important, which means how it feeds back to us is the reputational aspect of things, the marketing aspect of things, and the risk associated to these elements as well, because we don't want a relationship causing damage to the overall image or the brand of the business. And there could always be a variant where we allowed something, we created a particular opportunity, and now that has created a certain tension, and that could blow out of proportion. And if that gets blown, it could be a, if that goes wrong, it could be a PR nightmare. It could be really a tricky situation to deal with. So we want to be very careful, but while ensuring that this critical element is not missed. These collaborations usually and normally are positive, despite sometimes commercial confidence making it difficult to collaborate directly. So if there are direct competitors, right? So even some instances can make it really challenging because there is confidentiality and secrecy that is important for competitive edge. A small matter can change the paradigm of a business. So it is critical, because if one person sees a small file, a small video file, a small code file, right, something that is critical to that business, something that is uniquely intellectual property to the competitive edge that company has, and it gets looked at, it gets shared, something or the other happens, this can cause a major negative ripple effect back on that business. So confidentiality and secrecy are critical. Tenants selling services to third parties without doing their own R&D. So indirect business opportunities for certain businesses like support services and value system has to be looked at. So you would definitely be looking at the entire value system in the strategic analysis as well. This whole idea of tenants offering services to third parties is also a popular concept in many STPs in the world. So fellow tenants sometimes are potential clients from consultations, and that is where we noticed that consulting occurs, because some tenants can offer consultation services to others. The next expectation is that tenants expect, from the tenant's perspective, steady and reliable electrical supply that does not fluctuate in current and voltage, and safe distribution of this supply. So reliability is critical. Reputation risk is associated as well because of the safety element. So you don't need something going wrong and something happening to an employee and that becoming public news and that biting back to the reputation of the STP. While the tenant also is disappointed, and there could be clauses in the tenancy agreement that puts the company, puts the STP in a bad position if something goes wrong like this, due to elements that the tenant had nothing to do with, but elements that we were, or the STP was in charge of. Some tenants need to use sensitive electronic equipment that cannot withstand electric spikes, like specialty services. Some operate equipment that draws a significant electrical current far in excess of the standard electricity supplies, and to be able to switch them on and off without any concerns. So stability and the risk associated has to be considered when tenants really look for the STP to manage these aspects. Then high-speed data. This is another critical success factor which is becoming even more critical by the day with 5G and IoT tendencies. Collection of data from remote sources like cybersecurity can be looked at. Sharing large files with collaborators, so there is scale and strength expected within these high-speed data connections. Organize video conferencing with HD video, example, to stream prototypes in operation. So communication with outside the park and stakeholders, that has to be enabled. Pandemic impact also makes this more relevant than ever in a day and age where remote communication is now becoming the norm of communication itself. Then we look at the site security expectation. So tenants expect high levels of site security. It's critical, but also an industry norm and standard and a standard expectation by the tenants. Security is standard expectation, right? They anyway expect it, but it is critical. Not a unique selling point, but a critical general factor. It is non-negotiable when it comes to setting up operations within an STP. So tenants may be working on commercially sensitive new designs, and tenants could be working on government contracts, defense contracts that even involve national security, the pre-seen says. And many more scenarios make this an unavoidable critical success factor. So remember that there could be so many situations like this that KCTP could even be involved in one of the variants, and that could create unprecedented concerns, which makes it's so important for KCTP to ensure that their tenants' site security expectations are well managed. Administrative and other business service support, such as centralized call operator support, like value-added services. So VAS services or value-added services are a general offering and has become an industry norm for STPs nowadays, usually to focus attention on R&D work. So you can even consider charging a premium for convenience facilitated or selling point for marketing as well. You could pitch this aspect and the quality of these services. But another area that we have to understand is that there is that staffing and the management expertise that have to be taken care of if additional business support services are being offered to tenants. And that brings me to the next subheading. Convenience for staff is a major expectation by tenants, which is a fundamental offering as well. In terms of convenience, what are the different aspects? Convenience to work, privacy and safety, accessibility, and parking is expected. Bus services to public transport hubs and universities and airports are also very positively looked at, and in developed nations this is critical if and whenever you are looking at establishing a STP. Some tenants' requirements go beyond R&D, which usually depends on availability of infrastructure and the necessary expertise. There could be specialty requirements usually addressed during planning stages, investment requirements, tenant expectation analysis and management, etc. So I saw a couple of high-tech clusters which have exclusive spaces, exclusive science and technology park spaces dedicated to areas like biotechnology, and within biotechnology, molecular biology and different chemistry associated aspects that are being looked at, genome research that is being done, and these spaces have high level specialization in terms of equipment, design specifications, building requirements, all of that. There are a few examples of these in the additional reading documents I would be providing, or I would have provided to you in the research aspect. Now with the pre-seen, they give us a limited view on this. They tell us, but very common, limited manufacture and sale of parts and components is sometimes offered. Commercialization, but must be controlled to limited capacity. Commercial production can cause deviation from STP model. So we don't want our tenants, going into mass production and using that as a production or manufacturing opportunity. But we do want them, excuse me, we do want them to, if they want to, if they are really in the innovative space and if they really want to do limited manufacture, facilitating that will not be a harmful thing for the STP. Fabrication in a limited level, prototyping in a limited level, should we, how do we, and why would we, are questions that we can think about. But more and more popularly offered tools and offered facilities by some STPs in the world. Then an important aspect, controls. So controls are something that are critical to effectively and successfully managing a STP. Without controls, it's going to be very challenging. It's critical because renting space to others can be risky in multiple forms. So high rent, making it not cost effective to do mass manufacturing, which limits deviation from the STP model. Alarm equipped buildings for safety during emergencies. So emergency situation management is a critical aspect. security teams and patrols are employed, so human intervention for security is important, or else we would have robots and we would automate it and we would just have CCTV cameras. So human intervention is important, which is facilitated by the STP management themselves to retain control of security. So there is this question about, whether tenants can take care of themselves. But really within a STP, no, we don't want that happening. We want to have security teams and patrols reporting to ourselves or reporting to, in this case, KCTP, because if something goes wrong, we want to be in a position to, we want to be in the strongest position. And permission required prior to installations and safety checks for heavy equipment such as cranes, etc. Advanced control element inserted to ensure safety and continuity. So this authorization control is very, very important. And after looking at those general controls that have been provided, the final subheading under the tenant perspective pre-seen analysis is the different practical incident examples that the pre-seen has provided. The pre-seen usually uses the term when they want to start some examples. For example, so what we have done is we have directly extracted them and we isolate them to see what kind of situations can STPs go through. This is the general example set, and it is a testament to varying needs of tenants. One example was that engineering lab might need sufficient space to construct a full-sized prototype vehicle, right? So they would need sufficient space. Then installation and operation of a crane or other heavy equipment has been expected by tenants and has usually managed. Computer-aided design, CAD users can send files to fabricators who can build their prototypes using 3D printing technology. This is also something that is very common in the industry and used as an example to show how look at how many elements relate to this. Sending files, so data transmission, fabricators, so fabrication capability, 3D printing, modern and very popular technology, digital technology that is being used, and prototyping, build their prototypes. Practical examples. An electronics company might have a clean room used to manufacture limited quantities of products for sale. So that limited manufacture, especially with respect to electronics company, that example is cited in the pre-seen. So these are all different possible scenarios and possible incidents that STP would face in running its business. If specialized services are to be offered, should the STPs have the necessary expertise to manage and maintain high-tech installations? So that is something to think about, because to offer specialty services, we should be able to manage them, we should be able to control them, we should be able to be in a strong position to not let those things go out of hand. So if there's nuclear research being conducted, that definitely requires a lot of due diligence, and on our part, on the science and technology park's part, we will need expertise, strong human expertise. We would probably need people maybe from CCU, maybe a collaborative effort, but we would need people responsible on or taking the accountability from the STP's perspective to ensure everything is well taken care of. And that marks the end of segment number 1 of the pre-seen commentary. I hope you have a very thorough understanding. We looked at ideally 4 sections. We looked at what your role is. We looked at Adviland. We learned about Adviland. We learned about all the information available. We looked at what a science and technology park does. And from the STP's perspective, we looked at what they offer, what kind of challenges they face, what kind of various differentiators, right? What kind of variety in different spaces do they offer, the geographical elements, the location elements, the security elements, essentially the critical success factors of STP. And finally, we looked at the pre-seen information from the tenant's perspective. What does a tenant expect? What does a tenant hope to achieve by anchoring itself with a STP? And how can or what kind of controls are placed to ensure that tenants are well managed, etc., etc. So by this segment, or by now, you and me and we all I expect, have a very thorough understanding, a significantly strong level of understanding of how in general this industry works, while also knowing what your role is and about the country. On that note, let's wrap this segment up. I will see you hopefully in the second segment of the pre-seen summarization with the complete commentary. Until then, thank you very much.